This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning. Welcome to KHRC's listening session. My name is Abigail Phillips, and I am the Home ARP Program Manager for Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning. A couple things that we like to do in these listening sessions before I turn it over to our consultants for discussion, Home ARP overview. I'd like to go around the room and do a quick round of introductions. I think that helps everyone realize, who else is on the call and who we're talking to. So you know who I am. I'm just going to go around and call folks' names from the little boxes by your cameras. So Sean, you're up first.
Good morning. My name is Sean Bollig. I am a Senior Project Manager with M&L Associates. I'll be facilitating this morning's session.
Kevin.
Yes, hi. My name is Kevin. I'm with KHRC. I'm just here to listen in and learn some more.
Thanks, Kevin. Christine.
Yes, good morning. I'm Christine Reimler. I'm with Kansas Housing. I'm the Division Director for the Community Solutions Division.
Thanks, Christine. Joyce.
Good morning. I'm Joyce Marsh. I'm with Kansas Housing and I'm a compliance officer.
Thank you, ma'am. Megan. Megan, you were off mute for a second. Are you there? All right. Megan, it looks like you're still off mute, but we can't hear you. I'm going to circle back. Barry, you're up next.
I'm Barry McMurphy. I'm a program manager in Kansas Housing's Housing Development Division.
Thank you, Barry. Mary.
I'm Mary Jo Montague with Sunflower Health Plan. I'm the Housing Services and Support Coordinator.
Welcome. Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Herman. I'm the Interim Director for Contract Administration at KHRC.
Thank you. Stacy.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Tidwell. I'm with the Kansas Department for Children and Families. I'm the Deputy Director of Youth Programs.
Welcome, Stacy. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Sharp. I serve as Communications Director at KHRC and looking forward to learning how we can promote the program when it rolls out.
Thanks, Emily. Rebecca.
Hi, sorry about that. I didn't know how to unmute on this platform. My name is Rebecca Gaston. I'm the Director of Agency and Community Collaboration at Department for Children and Families.
Welcome, Rebecca. Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie Willow, Principal with Mullen and Lonergan Associates, and I'll be assisting Sean on this session. And together we're developing the allocation plan in conjunction with KHRC.
All right, thank you. Shonda.
Hi, my name is Shonda Gross, and I am a research analyst for Kansas Department of Health and Environment.
Thank you. Shyla.
Hello, I'm Shyla Rocket with Kansas Housing, and I am the ESG CSBG Program Specialist.
Thank you. Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Egan, and I work with the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition as the new Housing Crisis Counselor.
All right, welcome. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask everyone if they have ever heard of Home ARP in any aspect, just so we can kind of get an understanding of what type of information we should be providing to all of you. So if you've heard of Home ARP, however briefly, if you could just raise your hand so we're aware of how much folks know. Okay. No. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and he will give you an introduction to Home ARP and the program and what we're going to be talking about today. If you are welcome to, we'll be discussing stuff later on, so you're welcome to, unmute yourself and speak. But if you have comments that you'd like to drop in the chat, we will be recording those thoughts as well. So you're welcome to use the chat. All right, thank you all. And Sean, it's all yours.
Thank you, Abby. Before getting into this morning's conversation, I just want to go over a few slides to provide a little bit of an overview of the Home ARP allocation plan. It looks like Barry shared a link to some additional resources that are available from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the Home ARP program. Today is the last of our round one of listening sessions. Had a lot of productive engagement over the last week, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts this morning. Our agenda for this morning is to discuss a little bit of the program information under the Home ARP program. We will review the qualifying populations, or QPs as they are referred to. We will discuss the eligible activities under Home ARP, and we hope to identify some of the unmet needs of the qualifying populations throughout Kansas, and then we will get into the wrap up and discussion of next steps in preparing the home allocation plan. The Home ARP program comes out of the American Rescue Plan. Some of you folks may be familiar with other allocations that are available right now throughout the state of Kansas, particularly ARP funds that were made available through the local, state and local fiscal recovery fund. That is not what we are here to discuss today. The Home ARP program has a goal of equitably reducing homelessness and increasing housing stability. So throughout the country, $5 billion of supplemental home funds have been made available to assist individuals and households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, or to serve other vulnerable populations through housing, rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelter. Last week, one of the presenters, I thought, described this program very well as a hybrid of the traditional home program with a focus on HUD homelessness programs as well. These funds are available until 2030, so we really need to think long-term when discussing the needs that we see in the communities and how to best serve them over the coming years. Under the Home ARP program, we have several qualifying populations. It's important to keep in mind these qualifying populations because the Home ARP programs must serve these specific groups. There's homeless individuals and families, those at risk of homelessness. We have individuals and families attempting to flee domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. There are also other populations where providing supportive services prevent the family's homelessness. And then veterans are also eligible as long as they meet one of the preceding criteria that I just mentioned. The first qualifying population category is homeless individuals and families. So we are using the HUD definition of homelessness that includes individuals or families without a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. We have those residing in a nighttime residence that is not meant for human habitation. So this could be individuals or families staying in their car, in a park, an abandoned building. We have those that are residing in temporary living arrangements, those who have resided in a shelter or place not meant for human habitation, and who are exiting an institution where he or she temporarily resided. And finally, we have those who will imminently lose their housing, including housing they own, rent, or live in without paying rent, are sharing with others, and rooms in hotels. This last category includes those who have been served with eviction notices. The qualifying population that includes those at risk of homelessness specifies households with income at or below 30% of median income, lacking sufficient resources to attain housing stability, and include those who have faced multiple moves 2 or more times during the previous 60 days, those who are doubled up, those staying in a hotel or motel that is not paid for by a charitable organization or through other government programs. We have those residing in overcrowded housing and those exiting institutions. Under Home ARP, we have 5 very specific eligible activities. And as I mentioned before, these activities must serve one of the qualifying populations as they are defined by the Home ARP program. First, we have production or preservation of affordable housing. I do want to note that this does not include home ownership programs. And generally, when we look at production or preservation of affordable housing, we're looking at 15-year affordability period. Next, we have tenant-based rental assistance. If you're familiar with this program under Home, it's usually 24 months of assistance that is available. Under Home ARP, the grantee is allowed to adapt this length of rental assistance to fit the needs if this is something they wish to pursue. So they are not bound by that 24-month limit. Next, we have supportive services, homeless prevention services, and housing counseling. This includes McKinney-Vento eligible supportive services and those available under the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. These could include life skills training, housing locator assistance, childcare, job training. It's not a complete list, just some examples of possible activities. And the housing counseling must be provided by a HUD certified housing counseling agency. Next, we have purchase and development of non-congregate shelter. This includes units that have their own dedicated bathroom and plumbing. And after meeting a minimum use period, there is an option for a non-congregate shelter to be transitioned into an emergency shelter. It's important under this category to note that Home ARP funds may not be used to pay for operating costs of a non-congregate shelter or to transition to an emergency shelter. Finally, we have nonprofit operating and capacity building, and this is a set aside dedicated to organizations that are undertaking other Home ARP activities. I know that's a lot of information in a very short presentation. However, there are resources as Barry shared, and our full Home ARP presentation should be posted for reference if you care to learn more details. With that, I would like to get into this morning's discussion and take the time to hear from our attendees. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and begin by asking a few questions from those on the line today. So I guess it would be helpful to hear a little bit from you all about challenges to avoiding discrimination among homeless individuals and families or those at risk of homelessness.
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, can anybody talk a little bit about the challenges of avoiding discrimination among homeless individuals or families or those at risk of homelessness?
I'll just jump in and say that today's sessions were the focus of them was planned to be basically on organizations that address civil rights, fair housing, and needs of people with disabilities. But it sounds like from your introductions that there might be other folks who have joined in that have other issues they might want to or need to talk about. So, and this has happened through the course of, this happened last week through the course of our sessions where there was a specific group of stakeholders that we targeted at on each day, 2 sessions each day. But we certainly don't want to discourage anyone who might have chimed in because joined us because this is the only day that you could manage to squeeze us in and you still want to make your information available to us. We certainly appreciate it. So we have questions that are specific to that issue for today, basically civil rights, fair housing, and rights for disability groups, just to kind of set the context for where Sean's questions are coming from.
Thank you.
This is Rebecca from DCF. I appreciate the context, definitely. And are there specific types of discrimination that you're asking about, like based on disability or racial, ethnic discrimination, or?
Yeah, I think maybe as a starting place, you know, thinking of the protected classes under the Fair Housing Act, and if there are any additional protected classes within local or larger jurisdictions to be mindful of. But yeah, thinking of those protected classes and any challenges within the housing crisis response system.
This is Kristen. I'm new, I'm still learning, but one thing I've noticed just being around it a little bit, and maybe this doesn't pertain to what we're talking to, but a lot of times I find that, I mean, obviously we all know that landlords don't want to rent to people that have Section 8 vouchers or rapid rehousing vouchers, and it feels like they're discriminating based on income. I realize they have to have some income requirements. I've also found that when I'm trying to find housing for people in certain areas, if they're telling me they call everyone on like a Section 8 list and don't get anywhere, then when I call, I know that I get a lot different response. And I know, you know, you guys can see my face. I'm a white person, and when somebody that sounds like they are not white, I think they have a lot more trouble getting responses from landlords. And it feels frustrating for me, and I'm not even living it. And you know, it's not fair that I can make 2 calls and get somewhere, and somebody that sounds different than me can make 20 calls and get nowhere.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Similar to that, are there any specific challenges in making placements for individuals or families experiencing homelessness, or challenges with larger households or larger families?
I was just going to add the population I work with transitions from foster care into young adulthood, and we often face discrimination just due to that label of a young person who's experienced foster care. And they may also fit in protected classes. Different challenge, not only done absolutely an incorrect assumption or that they're a challenging teenager. They don't have the resources that other youth.
Thank you. So aging out of foster care, a lack of resources for that population.
Correct. And then just discrimination because they've got that label, a young person from foster.
Stacey, I have a clarifying question. So is it, I guess I'm just looking for a few more details about what is it that landlords assume about youth aging out of foster care that makes them not want to rent to them?
I think well, first off, I know that they make the assumption that they don't have resources, and so they're not willing to necessarily rent to them. I also think that they also have a perceived assumption that that young person has challenging behavior that the landlord might not want, when in fact the opposite may be true, that that child came into care due to circumstances beyond their control and transitioned out, and it's not, anything to do with their behavior that, precipitated foster care.
What and how would a landlord learn that an applicant is transitioning out of foster care and is an adult and can sign a lease? How would the landlord know that?
Typically, without having like a permanent address, they're having to use lots of temporary addresses, such as like a former foster parent as they're trying to apply, and then having to explain context of that relationship. Also, maybe explaining why they haven't had employment in the past until transitioning out, because they've been in various placements that have shifted and it's been hard to maintain that employment aspect. I think it comes out in a multitude of ways.
Thank you for that.
We've talked about race, ethnicity. We've talked about youth aging out of foster care. How about individuals with disabilities? Are there any barriers there that you would like to discuss?
I just think there's a low number of units available.
That are accessible, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, there aren't enough affordable housing, let alone ones that are also accessible, obviously. So.
Also, having a criminal background can make it difficult for someone to find housing. And even if it was a long time ago, some of the questions, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Doesn't say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They just assume it's been very recently.
I would also add former evictions or past history of problems they maybe had in a previous place they stayed, but it wasn't necessarily their fault.
Mm-hmm. How about individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities? Are there any barriers to maintaining permanent housing within that population?
I think maybe just the vulnerability of that individual. I've seen where landlords have taken advantage of the situation, and sometimes even with the fees they charge, if they don't get their social security check until like the 3rd or 4th, and then if it's a weekend, it might not come till the 5th, and then they immediately start charging late fees.
Mary, you're the executive director of what agency?
Right Through House.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit, just tell me a little bit about the population you serve, because there's something else I want to ask you, but I would just want to know a little bit more information.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. We serve primarily a lot of homelessness. We do have housing, so we're full right now, so we're trying to get more people in housing. With COVID, we found there's definitely added mental health issues that have arisen because of the stress and everything through COVID, and now with inflation rising. But we have a payee program where we serve approximately 260 people through the Social Security Administration. They authorize us to manage their payee for them. And then we have housing. Right now we have 32 people in housing, both HUD and non-HUD. We have apartments, duplexes, and group housing where we manage and staff full-time. And then we also have our clubhouse over on Van Buren. That's a daytime program only, but we do provide 2 free meals daily. It's free to be a member. You do have a diagnosis, so we work closely with Vallejo on the diagnosis through the case managers. And then once they're diagnosed, they can become a member for life. The daytime program allows them to have job, education, and placement, and they can work with health and wellness. We have a lot of organizations come in and speak to our groups and our members to help them through, just building up their lives and building up their self-esteem so that they can live, a more impactful life. But yeah, many of them come in. They're unfortunately, substance abuse is a big problem in our community, as you all know. So we work closely with trying to get them the help they need through Storm Vale and Vallejo and other resources out there. So that kind of is a quick synopsis there of what we do, and then I'll go off so everybody else can talk. Thank you.
Well, that's okay. Wait, I have
Okay.
a follow-up
Okay.
question. So the issue
Okay, great.
that you talked about with the intellectual and mentally disabled or vulnerable populations that landlords might charge extra fees. So I'm just wondering, because this would fall under the, this is a good opportunity for then those tenants to request reasonable accommodation. My question though to you is there a do you do any kind of training, fair housing training with any of the landlords that participate in your programs?
I would say no, we do not specifically do that, no. We have sent a letter out recently, and we do call them and talk with them about, the stress that our consumers are going through, right? And so many times they will understand. We have a few that will say, okay, we just sent a letter out recently and said, please don't charge a late fee. Give us at least give them at least till the 7th, in case the check comes in late from Social Security. So I think I agree with you that if there could be more conversation with those folks, it would really help a lot. And so maybe some outsourcing and things we could do together. If you have any, ideas on that, I would love to hear.
I'm going to put a few in the chat box because it's not a matter of asking the landlords to be nice. It's a fair housing law they have to accommodate. So I'm going to put a little bit of information while
love that even better. Thank you. Yeah, it really is unfortunate that happens because, even the hotels, sometimes if we don't have them in housing, we're really hands-on, so we'll take them off the street. We have 3 vehicles that if anybody we're currently helping said, we know of somebody that's out on the street, they're hungry, they're, whatever the case may be, we'll send a van out to go try to get them and bring them in and that sort of thing. So we're doing everything we can, and there's so many, good resources in Topeka. But we try to do the best we can, and anybody out there that we can collaborate with, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I think that's a good idea to educate some of the landlords about people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, because just because somebody looks different or talks different or acts different doesn't mean, that they're going to be a problem or a difficult tenant. So I think educating those landlords is very important.
Yes. Yeah, and then on the hotels, sometimes we have to put them in the hotel, and we hate doing that because there's some not so nice hotels. Travelers Inn, I will mention, as one that rather than being on the street, especially this winter, and 30, 20 below zero weathers or whatever we were dealing with, the winds, and we would get them into the Travelers Inn, but it's very well known that there's a lot of problems over there, and so, but it's better than them being on the street, and so we kind of talk them through it. Just go into your room, lock the door, don't talk to because there's, unfortunately, there's drug dealers out there that also take advantage of our vulnerable society, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, thinking of those vulnerable populations and the protected classes under the Fair Housing Act, I was just wondering, tying that into the home ARP qualifying populations, survivors of domestic violence, victims of human trafficking, the homeless, or those at greatest risk of homelessness. Are there any challenges, or are there any issues related to those qualifying populations? And thinking of like national origin or those of different religions, are there barriers to obtaining the services that those individuals might need? Like, for example, are there issues with perhaps migrant farm workers, or um, is there disparate access in the housing or homelessness system for those of a particular religion?
I'm not aware of any. I feel like the community works really closely together, and I'm not seeing any signs of racism or anybody treated unfairly or unequally as far as I'm concerned, but maybe someone else can chime in.
Mhm.
I just don't have enough experience working in the smaller towns where migrant populations might be more predominant. But so I don't know.
Mhm.
My name is Terry Roberts, and I'm with LifeWorks. We do the Social Security Ticket to Work program. And some of the people that I work with, what I see their biggest challenge is being aware of, and even when they're in services at an agency, realizing all of the services that are available to them through that agency. Maybe having some barriers such as their mental illness and their uh, intellectual disability, that they really need other people around them to kind of step up and help them be aware of the resources that are available out there. And they're just not aware of everything that they can access. And so we really need the staff that are around them to take the initiative a little bit more sometimes. That's kind of one of the barriers I see, and I have a very specific individual in mind on that one.
Are you aware of any programs that can serve as an example for how to reduce those barriers and provide more equitable access?
Well, I know Vallejo has case managers that work with housing issues, and of course, Mary just mentioned, what they have going through a breakthrough. But what I'm seeing in my individual that I'm thinking of is that he is not aware of all the services that are available at Vallejo. And so we've kind of been working on that to help educate him. Even though I don't work with Vallejo, I know he's getting services there. And so it's really kind of, we just need the staff to kind of take the step and the initiative to do that. There are services out there. It's just helping our consumers that we're working with be aware of them, and kind of not just giving them a pamphlet, but kind of walking them through the steps of accessing those resources.
I'll piggyback on that. That I think I totally agree. I don't work in Topeka specifically, but I have noticed that it seems like, I mean, it's social work, so we have a lot of turnover. It's a really hard job. So a lot of times the people that are, it's just hard unless you work at a job for a couple years, it's hard to wrap your head around all the services. And if a consumer gets a case manager that's been there for a long time, they hit the jackpot because that person can actually link them to. It's all about knowing the people at each agency, and it's a lot to understand as a case manager. So I think it's really hard if you haven't been there for a while to just know everything available to your clients. And it's not necessarily the case manager's fault, but it is hindering the clients.
And you make an
I'll,
excellent point. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if it's that daunting of a challenge for a social worker or case manager, putting it into the perspective of those
Imagine the consumer.
vulnerable residents, yeah, it's such a
Mhm.
daunting prospect. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Mary.
they're already overwhelmed with life circumstances, and then they have to try to understand this complex system and what's out there. It's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. This is Mary again. I was just going to touch on what Terry said also with, I call it a gap in services, not any one person's fault. Clearly, we're all working so hard at trying to help this industry. But one thing we just did, it's going to be a little financial toll on us, but I just felt the need that we had to get it done, is we just hired we're calling them a mental health services advocate. So this person will work between my directors of each program and working with the people with mental health issues. And what we're going to do is work with the Vallejo case managers closer so that if there's a need out there that they have, then they can share with us where, we could take them to the doctor, we can take them, over to Vallejo or to Stormont Vale or, whatever types of things that they need. And then, like you said, all these different resources out there, the LEAP program, for example, a lot of them don't know about that. And so many programs that all of you are providing. It's just so important that, we all stay collectively in touch, but we're also busy, right? So how do we have time to know what sources are out there and resources until we really can get connected, right? So it's this person we've hired full time, and they will be there to work with all three of our programs and holding the hand more of the mental health adult that needs those extra resources, and teaching them too how to do it, right? So we want to lift them up and educate them. So we'll work with them on a computer, or work with them on, calling together. Let's call, Vallejo. If you don't have a case manager, let's call Vallejo and go through the interview process, and we'll walk there with you and hold your hand through that process, and so many other programs that we have.
Thank you.
This is Rebecca from DCF. So what Kristen and Mary just said, I think sort of highlighted for me, or what I was thinking about with like the different home art funding options or spending options, like the capacity building, I think is needed in Kansas, just because, and I know like KHRC is just, I know you guys have expanded your capacity a lot during COVID, but just having been in direct service and now doing policy, like housing is the most confusing, like of all of the social services like areas. And I'm kind of working on a interagency grant project, and still learning, like, okay, the Public Housing Authority and the Continuum of Care Agency are not the same agency, and there's so many nonprofits that are helping people, and there's the Statewide Housing Coalition, and we all try to work together, but some sort of like network or something to make it easier for like consumers to navigate the system, and for their caseworkers, attorneys, anybody who's helping these consumers navigate the system. And I don't even know, like right now, I don't know where I would send somebody if they were trying to help their client find housing. I mean, I might send them to the housing authority, but that's probably not all. So I just feel like capacity building, and then, well, and additional supply are the two priorities I would vouch for.
For sure.
The term navigator, I think, has come up in almost every session that we've had. The need for people, entities that can help folks navigate the various systems that they have to get through and the various resources out there.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also wonder, is there a way we can align things so it's not quite as hard to navigate? Like, is there a little bit we can do to make it a little less complicated?
Do you guys think that it's like hard for us all to communicate with each other? Or like, I know that Jonathan at KDADS has like uses a system for all the SOAR workers to communicate. So like you can ask a question, it goes out to everyone and then get more feedback. Like, is that something that would be helpful, or is that way too broad? Would that be like 100 people messaging a day and it would get chaotic? I don't know. Is it just that we don't know the point person of each program? I don't know like how to fix it necessarily.
It's a good question though.
I feel like that's like the ultimate question because like how to communicate without over, saturating each other with messages. And I've talked to like Missy Bogart Starkey at KDADS who works closely with Jonathan, and she's told stories about like trying to track down resources for clients and having to make so many phone calls, or maybe it was something like she was trying to verify that somebody qualified for a certain program. So maybe if there's a way we can do data sharing so that
for sure. I'm in that exact situation right now. I have a client and I can't get anyone to just give me an answer of where to go, and it's like there has to be an easier way.
Oh, so now it's coming back to me in my head, like, okay, so this project that I'm working on with KHRC and KS, Kansas State Homeless Coalition, and KDADS and KDP, like we have a technical assistance opportunity through the National Academy of State Health Policy. And part of what we're trying to do is sort of create a data sharing place to so that you can see if somebody's on Medicaid. Like if you're at a COC, you can see if they're on Medicaid, you can see who their MCO is. And I know somebody from Sunflower was on here, right? So but being able to know, like at the COC, like we can help find these services, maybe housing supportive services. And that's one thing, like we're like, how can we get Medicaid to cover some of the support services to help people stay in their homes, especially, that might be people with disabilities or with like physical or intellectual, to help them maintain housing. And then, but the other side too, like if somebody's on Medicaid, like being sustainably or safely housed is huge for their health. And so if the MCOs can see like what the history is with the COCs or something, like just having that information sharing, maybe that would be a good capacity building thing for the home ARP to consider, I think.
Love that.
And I know I've kind of worked with Abigail on that, so I might be like, I might be out of the lane of this listening session, but I do think it's something that could sort of provide a good foundation for building capacity moving forward.
And I completely agree with you, Rebecca. This is Mary Jo from Sunflower, and you too, Kristen. There does seem to be difficulty, when you're just starting out, trying to find someone housing and searching for all the resources, and it would be nice to have that communication together and be able to pull things together a little quickly, because it can take quite a while. And as we all know, we've been talking about like transitional housing, because you're not going to just walk into an apartment the next day, most likely. So what do we do in between those times when they give that first shout out for, hey, I really need the help, but I don't know where to go. So just keeping everyone connected, I think, is a great idea. Thanks for bringing that up.
I know right now it feels like my only option if I get a client is I make sure they have a VI SPDAT done, and then I sit and wait for the community queue meeting, and I just cross my fingers that we're going to get to them, and depending on the region we do or we don't, but and that just feels slow to me. I know people can't always pick up clients right away. It's just sometimes I'm waiting. I'm like, okay, well, we did this assessment, so I'll talk to you in 2 weeks and cross your fingers that you'll get picked up. And that just seems slow to someone that's homeless.
Yeah, and connecting that to like like some of the protected classes that Sean had mentioned earlier, like with human trafficking in particular, you know, while they're homeless, the most vulnerable for that.
Yes.
So if they can't get the housing fast enough, I mean, that's a time
Huge.
when if they've been trafficked before, or if they haven't, like, you know,
Mhm.
somebody says, oh, you can stay with me. Oh, you've been staying with
Mhm.
me, so now you need to do
Yep.
this. So yeah, I don't know exactly if that
No,
violates the fair
that's
housing,
exactly right.
but
You feel like
they're
time is
vulnerable.
wasting and they're in danger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question just in terms of participation in supportive services or permanent supportive housing. Are there any disparities in, for example, race, ethnicity for participation in those services?
I don't know who would have that data.
How about in your VI SPDAT data, has there been any disparity in racial and ethnic households evaluated?
I'm sure that somebody at my organization, probably Dylan, could pull that. I'm not sure. I shouldn't speak like that, but I think he probably could. I mean, that question is asked in VI SPDATs, but I don't know if it's currently being tracked.
Are folks in the meeting today, are you aware of any best practices that are currently being used to ensure equitable access to the programs or supportive services? Even if it's, you know, staff training for case managers or those conducting intake. We've touched on supportive services a little bit, oh, quite a bit actually, but are there any other supportive services we haven't discussed that are needed throughout the state or within your community?
What about for veterans? Do we have, and we do have some veterans. I don't know if we have any particular programs that I might not be aware of.
What about looking at housing needs, just in general, as they relate to the qualifying populations that we discussed earlier? What are some of the housing needs that you see within your community? We talked a little bit
So can we
about
go back?
yeah.
Sorry, can we go back to the last question about supportive services? One thing I was just thinking about is if somebody's evicted, or you know, or their landlord files an eviction case, like there's not a lot of access to attorneys for low-income individuals for evictions. And I know, like, I think KC Metro just started one of like requiring attorneys be appointed in eviction cases, and I think that could be really powerful for ensuring that the Fair Housing Act is being complied with in Kansas, because I don't know what kind of like monitoring would be happening around that. Like if somebody's, you know, if there's discrimination happening, like with landlords in how they choose to file evictions versus working with tenants, maybe.
Rebecca, did you mention someone who's already doing that?
So I don't know if anybody is, I think Kansas Legal Services, oh, I'm sorry, I did, sorry. That's in the Kansas City Metro. I think on Kansas City, Missouri, they just started something with that, like KC Tenants, I think had advocated for it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You all may have some awareness of this, but I have learned of programs where in the districts with households at the greatest risk of eviction, groups have worked with legal staff to have an attorney on site to work with households facing evictions to keep them out of homelessness. I certainly think the veterans consideration is something important that we need to monitor as they relate, especially to the qualifying populations. How about housing needs as they relate to the housing crisis response system? We've talked about a lack of affordable units. Is there a need for a higher number of permanent supportive housing units? Help navigating the system to identify those available units, or obtaining assistance for security deposits?
I think yes to all of that.
Rebecca, you spoke about the organizational capacity needs. Are there any other specific organizational capacity needs that you see among providers?
I guess the two I mentioned was like the data sharing and the sort of additional alignment if possible. And I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of needs and I like all of them. And so I would, probably others who are doing more direct service right now might have more to say about that. But an example that just popped into my head about like the supply issue, and Stacy said, well, I don't know if she's still on here, but there are federal vouchers called FYI vouchers for young adults who have aged out of foster care. And I think housing authorities can get about 25 from the federal government. So it's nothing, but they're not taking advantage of it. There's only 2 or 3 in Kansas who are taking advantage of it. And I think like what she said is like the Kansas City area housing authorities, they don't have enough supply for the vouchers that they already have. So there's, it's not really a priority to like get more vouchers. So, I mean, that just sort of highlights the supply issues from what I've heard.
When you say supply, you mean supply of affordable housing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like there are, I mean, you could give, I'm in Lawrence, we're statewide, but that's just what I'm speaking to because that's what I know the most of. There aren't any landlords left that will rent to anyone with a voucher. So the vouchers don't do any good if nobody's willing to it's an enormous, huge, that's the biggest problem I see. Landlords don't want to work with people with vouchers.
So I just want to go into that a little bit more. So Lawrence, with the university there, is it because the landlords probably can get a lot more for housing without vouchers, right?
Oh, no, they would be getting the same amount of rent with the vouchers as without. So if it's $1,000 a month unit and the housing authority pays $800, then of course the tenant would pay the other $200. So they make it's no difference in what the landlord gets. They don't want tenant.
My point is that there's so many other, like students would be willing to pay more is what I'm saying. They can get more without participating in a voucher program, the landlords.
No, they don't want people that need a voucher.
Okay.
That's it. That's honestly what it is. They think you're going to tear up the place. You're going to bring people they don't want in their apartments. I mean, it is, and I don't want to speak for everywhere, but I go to the regional meetings in all the regions and landlords do not want to rent. There aren't as many private landlords anymore. So a lot of the way it used to work, there would be a lot of smaller landlords that would be willing to rent to them. I think it doesn't make any sense to me. I've worked in a complex that took vouchers. It's an awesome program. You're guaranteed the money. It's very little work for the landlord, but a few people with vouchers will cause a mess, and then the landlords are like, forget it. We're just not taking any vouchers. Even the low income, they're not called low income, but the more affordable units, they could get renters if they took vouchers, but they're not doing it. I mean, the list of landlords, Section 8 landlords in Lawrence is short. It's short.
Is it similar for rapid rehousing landlords?
Yep. These programs are a good idea, but they don't work if no landlord is willing to rent to them.
And that makes so much, sense of how it works. Not that it's not a good thing, but is that something that could be a nonprofit capacity building, like nonprofits that ran affordable housing?
That would be amazing. Like if a nonprofit could just have an entire complex, rent to them, have social services on site. Of course, that would be amazing. Because no one else is going to rent to them.
That would be amazing.
Sorry. We just completed a statewide housing needs assessment that was not particularly focused on homelessness or affordable housing, but it was kind of a broader, higher level analysis. We heard this in some communities, and in particular in Kansas City, Kansas, I think also some in Lawrence, but there were other places across the state where we heard that people with vouchers, had a greater challenge, and in some communities were just unable to find housing. As you said, it's partly a perception of who it is that has vouchers or needs vouchers. It's also a bureaucratic, red tape kind of thing. If you're a landlord and you have voucher recipients, then you've got to prepare your unit every year for that annual inspection, and you've got to maintain the property standards, and you've got to fix doors and windows and things that you might otherwise let slide for another year. So it's an issue, and probably at some level it's probably a greater national housing policy issue. We spent decades building public housing complexes, projects, and then spent decades tearing them down and replacing them with vouchers on the assumption that that it's going to work better, and now we're hitting some speed bumps with that process.
Yeah, if there are communities that have successfully used vouchers, in Kansas or somewhere else, I'd be interested to hear how they worked with the landlords to incentivize. I know that some, RRH or HP programs have incentives for landlords. I don't know how often those are being used or how useful they are. I just don't know. I don't know who's done it successfully, but that's the main problem I've seen, is that landlords don't want to rent to that population. If you need a voucher, we don't want you here.
Some public housing authorities have instituted risk mitigation funds, which is are you familiar with those?
Well, I assume that if damage is done, they'll pay for it.
Yeah, up to a certain amount, you can file a claim. So the one I'm most familiar with is in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and it's like a $2,500 claim that a landlord can file for damage caused by a voucher resident through their program. And some places are trying that.
Marjorie, can you provide information on that? Sorry, this is Mary. No, could you provide information to us on that? I would be very interested, because we have landlords that basically threaten to sue our people if there's any damage at all on the property. And again, sometimes it's not their doing,
Yeah. Also, it's just, like I said, I think that's a good idea, but as somebody that used to be a landlord that took Section 8 vouchers, and would do it again. I love the program, but $2,500 doesn't go anywhere. That's not, I mean, what does that cover? 2 appliances? It can get crazy. And it only takes one of those to ruin it for, 100 other people. So that's the problem. And
Yeah.
obviously they're dealing with issues that cause them to cause damage, but that's what has happened.
Right.
In terms of unit sizes, are there different types of units that you see in greatest demand? Is this for single bedroom units or for larger sizes to accommodate larger households, or is it all of the above?
I think
At
it's more
Breakthrough House,
commonly.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, okay, Kristen. At Breakthrough House, we have 2 group homes that are fully managed by us. We provide food, all the amenities, utilities, everything's paid for. And we have a third one I just put in the chat there that we're working on. Vallejo did not renew their contract on that one, so it's over there on Tyler Street. We do own it, and so right now it's vacant. We did have some construction that we had to put together on that. We got that all completed, and so we're looking at getting that licensed as a group home, and whether or not we would need to fully, man it, depending on the type of individuals that would need to stay there. It's just like a house, so it has, we had women on one floor and men on the other floor. We didn't seem to have too much problem with that. It was transitional housing, however. So if we're looking at long-term stay, we'd have to think about what would be the best, most suited for that building. There's bathroom upstairs and bathroom downstairs. So those one area that we could be helpful. But yeah, if we have independent living, if they're able, they have case managers that work with them. So duplexes where they can stay, and then the case manager will check on them, and we can check on them, and they do pay rent, usually through their Social Security. So we can help them with that if there are payee, or if not, there's other payees that, we can, that they'll get the rent paid through. So the good thing about the payee programs that are in Topeka is we're able to help manage that money for them so that we pay their rent, we pay their utilities, we pay their phone bill. So it's really helpful for them so they don't get their money into the wrong hands with the vulnerability situation that they're under. They get on the street and, people steal their food cards. I mean, it's really sad, but we do the best we can to help them be strong enough to not let that happen. And same with damage, right? I mean, there's like, well, my friend came over and then another friend came over and I left and they damaged the property. It's like, well, you're still responsible, right? Because it's in your name. So it's a tough situation, so we're trying to strengthen their hearts and minds, and they can call us if they have issues and they're concerned about something, or somebody's getting in a fight in their building, call us. We'll do what we can to help. We'll call the case manager and team up and get them the help they need.
May I ask a follow-up question? Just in terms of any affordable housing, there are often the challenges of community pushback or NIMBYism. Have you encountered that in the creation of or development of any of your affordable housing?
As far as the neighborhood, you mean, or?
Yeah, neighborhood or municipality.
Municipality-wise, I'm not seeing a problem that I'm aware of. I would say neighborhood-wise, if they do, in fact, I do have one. I won't mention the address, but I'm working closely with Vallejo on this, and this person just allows people to come over, and next thing he's having issues, and so the fire department will come or the medics will come get him to the hospital, and then next thing you know, there's still 3 or 4 people in there partying and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So, we collaboratively do everything we can. We work with the CIT police department in trying to, get their support, and they'll come over but the neighbors, oh my goodness, if they see anything. Luckily, I have, this neighbor has my cell phone, and he'll call me and he'll text me. And so I can know that there's a situation, and we immediately try to jump on it. So we're working as a team, which I think if we can collectively do that as well and help the neighbors understand, these are people that struggle with mental health, and, please be patient, allow us to have these conversations and work together with them. But there are some, I'm just going to say it straight up, there's some drug houses out there in our neighborhoods that they see vulnerability, and they find out there's someone living down the street that has a mental health issue. They'll just, they go after it because they know, they could take advantage. It's very, very sad.
Yeah, I think that in that same way, I think a lot of the times the places that like transitional housing or any kind of housing program get placed in the lower income neighborhoods because those people are probably likely renters. If you try to go into a nice neighborhood, that might be a much safer environment for the people that are trying to stay off of whatever substance they used. Those people are going to throw a fit. So you just end up putting the transitional housing or the supportive housing in neighborhoods that are probably a little higher risk.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, if I can jump in, one of the things that we hear about in like Section 8 projects, when they're designed for elderly and disabled households, a lot of the elderly households get very frustrated with the disabled households where the headquarter spouse is not an elderly person as well. They don't want the young people in their property, but those young people are always the disabled households that are on the property. So the manager has to deal with a lot of the headache of residents fighting or picking on the disabled residents because they don't want them there.
Certainly a fair housing related issue there as it relates to disability. And as a follow-up question, is age a protected class in the state of Kansas?
No.
Okay. Okay. Were there other supportive service housing needs? Any fair housing issues that we haven't addressed that folks would like to talk about?
Just more financial support, but that's, I think, a different topic maybe, but definitely reaching out for grants and financial support to support these housing projects. We're trying to get grants right now that would allow us to, there's so many disgruntled properties that are just vacant, and just the blight is just, terrible for the neighborhood. And it's like, hey, give us some grants, allow us to go in, fix up the property, and get some people in there that really need it, and get them off the street. The businesses, in their side, I mean, I get it. You're at a restaurant, and then someone comes in, and they don't look the way as some of the others do, but they're still humans. They still have a heart, they still have a soul, and they are coming in from the heat or from the cold to get a glass of water, and sometimes they get chased out. And so I would say, if we can find ways to work collaboratively with the business owners and the community, and letting them say, help us so we can help everybody, right, on both sides of the spectrum. We understand both sides, but we care about our people. We're just financially don't always have the funds to be able to support as many as we want to. There's such a demand. We get so many calls every day, and it breaks our hearts. I mean, we take them in as much as we can, which I'm sure all of you do.
One thing I do want to mention, Mary did in the chat post her contact information and asked if anyone else who's willing to do so on the call, so that you just have a few more contacts as a result of this meeting. So feel free to post your information, your contact information.
Okay. Marjorie, did you have any follow-up questions for the group?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. I want to thank you all for engaging in this really constructive conversation. I think it's been really helpful. In terms of next steps, so there is an online survey. If that link can be shared in the chat box, if folks can take that survey to as a follow-up, that would be helpful as part of our home ARP allocation plan development. So I wanted to remind folks that the comments from these sessions and the survey will be considered when drafting the home ARP allocation plan. There is a second round of conversations that will be occurring, and those sessions will focus on identifying eligible activities under the home ARP program that meet the needs of the qualifying populations. Recordings of these sessions will be uploaded to KHRC's Home ARP project webpage. And then in terms of longer term next steps, a 15-day public comment period on the draft allocation plan is tentatively scheduled for September. It's been asked in other communities why this process has the timeline it does, and that's because HUD has such robust public participation and consultation requirements, that this to really dive into the data and engage all the stakeholders, it really does lend itself to a longer planning process. And then submission of the home ARP allocation plan is anticipated to occur sometime in late September or October. So with that, I see Abby dropped a link to the survey in the chat. And Abby, did you have any closing comments for the group?
Sure, and I think we have a slide with my contact information, if I'm not mistaken. Is that on there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I will post it in the chat, not a problem.
Okay.
So as Sean said, thank you all for participating in this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and sharing your expertise with us. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. So I know that Barry posted information about home ARP in the chat as well. If anyone wants to follow up with me with comments, questions, concerns, you are more than welcome to. We will take written comments by email if you want to provide those for our consideration for the home ARP allocation plan. So with that, I'm going to finish typing my email. If I can remember what it is. There we go. So with that, I will thank you all for your time, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Great visiting with everyone.